Good morning, frothers, and welcome back to Wheatlow Brewery for another brew day. And today we've got an exciting beer, another blast from the past, a beer that I used to love and enjoy occasionally in the late 90s. And that beer is called Deuchars IPA from Caledonian Brewery in Scotland. Now, this was a beer I think launched in about 1991. But in its heyday was probably the late 90s, early 2000s, and I believe it won Champion Beer of Britain Cameras Award in 2002. And that's the first time that a Scottish brewery had won the Champion Beer of Britain. So it was a landmark beer. It was a little bit on the unusual side, I suppose. It's one of the new wave of pale coloured, reasonably hoppy golden ales that were getting popular already at that time. It had a lovely golden colour, a creamy head, a nice hoppiness, but was easy to drink, and around about 4% or 3.9 perhaps. I haven't seen it about much, and the last few occasions I had it, I didn't think much of it, but I got very fond memories of it in the late 90s. And what reminded me about this beer is that we've got a batch of Fountainbridge yeast, a new dried yeast from WHC, and this is a beer that relates very strongly to McEwan's Brewery, which was at Fountainbridge in Edinburgh, but also the Caledonian Brewery, also from Edinburgh. So I thought I would look up the beer, research it, and try and recreate it how I used to remember it when it was nice. And I don't know what happened to it exactly, but Scottish and Newcastle bought the brewery initially, and then Heineken then bought the brewery, and then surprise, surprise, in 2022 I think the brewery was shut down, and I think flats are being built now, or some such projects. Now, it's a little bit demoralising sometimes, isn't it? Because sometimes I think of a lovely beer that I used to enjoy. I think, oh, it'd be nice to brew that. And then I look up the history of it, and the flowchart seems to end in a couple of breweries, Heineken, Marston's, AB InBev, those kind of breweries, leads to closure, ruination of the beer, lack of availability, watered down or lower quality of the actual beer being produced, and therefore it not being the beer that it was. And this is a theme that could be quite frustrating to one as a drinker, but as a home brewer, of course, we've got the opportunity to try and recreate what's been lost, and that's exactly what we're going to try and do today. We're going to try and recreate Deuchars IPA as it was in its heyday. Now, I've got a bit of info here that from some online research that looks like an email from one of the brewers there, and it does reveal a few secrets, if you like. Also, it's in the Graham Wheeler book, How to Brew Your Own Real Ale at Home, later editions, not the original one. But I prefer this information here because it looks a bit more realistic. So Golden Promise is the malt base, and he also says that later we use 65% optic malt due to supply and quality, and not price, of course. And so he also says you could use Maris Otter. And he says that we use a small percentage of wheat in the beer and 10% sugar to control colour and help fermentation. Again, nothing to do with cost. And so I've interpreted that in the following way. We're going to use 91.3% Golden Promise. Golden Promise is a lovely base malt, Scottish. It's got that bit of something about it that's going to give you a bit more than your standard pale malt. And of course we use that in Landlord, and we used it in the recent Usher's, Thomas Usher and Son beer that we did, which is also a Scottish beer. So we're going to blend that with 8.7% torrified wheat, which will give us that lovely fluffy creamy white head. and help with the head retention as well. And then in the email it says that they use Fuggles as the bittering hop at the start of the boil, and then later on Styrian Goldings, he says, Willamette, Super Styrian, which I think is Aurora, and Fuggles if you need to substitute any of the others. Now, my interpretation of that is that we're going to put 24.3 IBUs of Fuggles in at the beginning of the boil, and then later on we're going to cool the whirlpool down to 80 degrees at the end, and we're going to put in 12 IBUs of Styrian Goldings, 4.2 IBUs, or about 25% of that whirlpool hop, of Willamette, which should give us a little bit of orangey notes. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to use the Fountainbridge yeast. I've already done a couple of beers with it so far. I've done the Jarl Scottish beer from Fine Ales. I've done the special Usher's historical beer, and this is a definite candidate for that yeast as well. Now, what I've noticed as well is that the yeast chews through the wort fast. It really gets going quickly. And it attenuates it right down as well. So that's exactly what I need, because it'd be lovely if we can get this beer ready for when the malt miller come and film here on a brew day, which is based on testing this yeast, and I can present them with 2 or 3 beers using this yeast, which will be quite a nice thing to be able to do. But that day is only 2 weeks away, so fast fermentation appeals to me for this particular project. We're going to pitch it actually straight onto the lees of the Jarl, which I've just finished fermenting, and it's cooling down now, so I've got to cask that to free the tank up, and then we'll put this wort straight onto that yeast cake, and I imagine then that will get going quickly. But because we're reusing this yeast now for the second time, having used it first on the Ushers, secondly on the Jarl, I'm going to add some yeast nutrient at the end of the boil, along with the proto-flock as well, so that we make sure that as it's a repitch, this is going to be a nice healthy fermentation. So really looking forward to this beer. It is one I've got fond memories of drinking, and I expect it will be quite popular with my neighbours here, because it's the kind of beer that they love. It's not lost on me that there's quite a few similarities to this recipe to Timothy Taylor Landlord. Golden Promise is Landlord, I think from memory, is 100% Golden Promise, and I think uses some Fuggles and a lot of Styrian Goldings. So the difference with this beer to the Landlord is it's not quite as bitter, and we're using some Willamette as well as the Styrian Savinsky Goldings, at the whirlpool stage. It wasn't unusual in those days, in fact in these days as well, for brewers, whether home brewers or small breweries, to try and do some kind of a version of a Landlord beer, because it was such a successful, award-winning and delicious beer. So we've mashed in already, actually. I'll put the footage on next, but now we're just waiting for it to come to the boil and get the show on the road. Right, we're all mashed in behind me, and pH is looking good. It's 5.2, which I'm happy with. Anyway, I'm happy with 5.2, 5.3, and we're keeping the mash temperature at 66.5. So we'll leave it for an hour and come back for the sparge. I'm going for a total IBUs of around about 40, and of that 40 IBUs, 24 is this amount of Fuggles is going to go in at the beginning of the boil. And then we're going to do a late whirlpool hop. So Styrian Goldings, we need 600 grams in my case. So I've got my yeast nutrient and brewing in there, and just need to get 200 grams of Willamette and we'll be in business. 200 grams of Willamette as well. I'm just going to have a sniff of this because beautiful smell to those, like just that subtle flavour of orange. So we've got the Deuchars IPA in this fermenter. We've pitched it straight onto the lees of the Earl that we've just fermented with the Fountainbridge yeast, and that's completed from start to finish in 3 days. So it's a very fast working yeast indeed, and there's a good healthy amount at the bottom of the cone of yeast in there. So I expect that this will get going really quickly. Be interesting to see exactly how. So it's 1:10 in the afternoon now. And when that's bubbling, instead of being the next day, I imagine that won't be that long at all. But anyway, it'll probably ferment nice and quickly as well. I'm really excited about the beer. We've hit the numbers, 1039 original gravity. The pH is 5. It tastes nice. So excited to see how this one turns out. See you in a few days. Right, just 40 minutes later, and it's bubbling away already behind me, and just 20 degrees I set it to, but and that's what I fermented the Earl at in 3 days, but I'm going to turn it down actually to 18.5, just to make sure that when it's off to such a flying start that we don't get any off flavours by it being so excited. I think the yeast that we pitched into the Earl was so prime and so fecund because it had come out the top of the union set harvested like that it's just really good pitch of yeast. But there are it's rare in homebrewing, but there are dangers from over pitching and that sort of thing. So I think that's why I'm going to just turn the temperature down. Let me know in the comments if you think that's the right approach. I can always turn it up again, of course, but let's just keep it reasonably calm rather than letting it rip through it in 24 hours or something. So that's what I've decided to do. Let us know what you think of that. Right, we're just 24 hours after putting this wort into the fermenter, and I've just checked the gravity. It's on 1012. It's burst out through the spunding valve with the yeast has. I've never had that on any other yeast. So there's something going on with this yeast. And also, I turned it down to 18.5 at the beginning when I thought it was getting going too quickly. And then I turned it down again to 17.5. It's currently at 16.8 because it's just dropped a little bit below within the tolerance. And it's nearly finished within 24 hours. So what a yeast. I've just had a taste as well, and there's no, funny smells or what have you, or tastes. So I'm not worried that it's giving off any bad flavours from this fast fermentation. I suppose the only thing I could have done by turning the temperature down is reined in the fruitiness, which may be perhaps undesirable, but I was trying to be careful. So yeah, unbelievable yeast. And just think of this in terms of, well, my current little home brewy problem at the moment is that I'm doing a lot of Czech lagers and they're tying up my tanks. And this means that it's hard to produce as many normal beers with one other tank. And certainly one way around that is to turn a beer around in 3 days rather than say 10 days for a slower yeast. So it's a way of solving my temporary tank blocking problem from the lagers. And if the beer comes out nice, which I've every reason to believe it will do, then this will be a very useful yeast for both commercial and home brewers to be able to take some shortcuts with a non-kveik or that kind of yeast with a normal ale yeast. So and at a normal temperature fermentation as well, in fact cool temperature in this case. So very interesting. Right, the Deuchars is ready for casking, so I'm going to cask it now. Cooled it down nice and cold, and I've put some Super F into each cask, so let's get it casked now. And I've got the cask on the scale here, so just switch on and you can see how fast that's filling up. And I'm aiming for 40.8 kilos, I think it is, in a cask. Perfecto. So a week or two later, and you can see that this beer is cask conditioned absolutely beautifully. And when we pour it through the sparkler, it's pouring quite a rich, dark golden colour with an amazing, thick, tight bubbled, long-lasting, frothy white head that's a good thickness of one finger and stays that way as the beer settles down, as it's doing here on the drip tray. And good things come to those who wait. So we'll let this pint settle, and then we're going to have a word with Tom and Mike and see what they think about this beer. And if you remember when we had Paul here from WHC with the malt miller, he picked this beer out as his favourite out of 17 beers on that night. Right, we've got the top team here now tasting the Deuchars IPA. We've got Tom and Mike.
Evening.
And well, first of all, got a bit of froth on the job, haven't you?
Tear froth, yeah.
It's a good head.
Real good pint.
Tight bubbles, creamy head, moves about when you move the glass.
That's it.
Clear as a bell. So yeah, it looks good, doesn't it?
Yeah, real good, yeah. Mine's a clean, just nice.
Now, do you remember Deuchars IPA? You're a lot younger than I am.
I don't remember Richard's name.
Yeah. Well, it does still exist. Do you remember it, Mike?
I'm just a young pup, so unfortunately not.
It still exists, but
does?
yeah. At one time, in I think late 90s, early 2000s, it was flying, and I think it won some good awards. It was one of the first really popular golden ales, new golden ales that came out.
Right.
And it was just really quite exciting at the time. And then it sort of got big businessified, and the brewery was shut, and it was brewed elsewhere, and things like that. And people say that it's not the drink that it used to be, but you kind of think still get it.
Yeah.
So, but I haven't got one to compare it against, unfortunately.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. But what I do remember about it was a lovely golden colour, had a thick creamy head that lasts all the way down the glass.
Beautiful.
It's drinkable.
Have you tried it before?
Very Moorish. I think I had a couple of pints of it a few weeks ago, but yeah, real good, really nice.
Trouble is it's only 3.8, I think, just slips down.
It's very drinkable, isn't it? It's got some.
It is. It's easy to drink. It's not too It's not as hoppy as the Earl, is it?
No.
But it's got some hops there. But they're not, anyone that sort of doesn't like a beer too flowery, too hoppy, too citrusy would like this beer.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah,
nice.
it's got quite a soft hop character to it.
Mark's enjoying his by the looks of it.
Yeah.
Sitting getting down that, Mark.
Yeah.
It's not a race, you know, Mike.
No.
Enjoy it.
It's only my second, so.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Got a thirst on. Yeah, good.
Look at the head on that.
So when you go to the pub, would you normally have a pale ale, a pale golden ale like this, or?
I don't tend to go to the pub. I come here instead. So I get what I'm given, but it's always good, and I personally prefer a lighter ale, just because it just tends to just drink it better and faster.
Goes down better, doesn't it? Yeah.
Because a lot of people around here do still drink Bass, don't they?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can't drink Bass.
You don't like
Not
Bass?
for me, no. No.
What, because it's too sweet, or?
I can't take to it. Where with that, it's just plenty of taste for it. I don't know. Not for me. The Bass isn't. But
Is it the next day for you, Tom?
not so much that I don't think, but I don't know. I've never took to really the Bass.
It's just not as refreshing as this.
I think you're
This
right.
is it.
Yeah, I
This
think
is
you're
it.
right, Richard. It is very.
Spring's here. You know, we're into spring now officially. This is what you want, isn't
Yeah.
it? This is what you want.
Yeah, beautiful.
And it's school night tonight, so having some at 3.8.
Yeah,
just
that's
the job.
right.
Ideal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of pints
Put
of
us
this,
in-
and you'll be up in the morning, no problem.
Yeah.
won't
No, exactly.
you? Yeah. No, very good. Ready for another one, I think.
I've got a 6% dark ruby mild for you next.
No, I think I'll pass on that one.
That looks pretty good.
Pretty
Yeah.
good, isn't it? Oh, I'm enjoying it.
Can't grumble at that for head retention.
No, really good. Still keeping the head of mine.
Lacy.
I think it's time for another one, Richard.
Yeah, I'll go and pour some more.
do it.
Ale. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Wheatlow.